Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
All right, welcome back. I want to tell you a little story about when I was a kid, when I was in high school, junior high. We talk about public speaking and standing in front of the class. I was never afraid of it. I think I'm kind of an introvert. I know I'm kind of an introvert. I love the weekends, just kind of being home, being by myself, going to the movies by myself. I know it's weird. But when I had opportunities to speak in high school, junior high, grade school, hey, do I have a volunteer? My arm was up. I mean, I even remember when I was in 8th grade, my voice was changing, and rather than shrinking from that, I'm like, no, I am going to own this. I'm going to own it with this crackly voice. I'm not saying I'm a good public speaker. I'm not saying that at all. I was just never afraid of it. Put me in front of the whole school, whatever. And I know not everybody's like that. And some people are deathly afraid of that. So today I have on here somebody who's going to talk with us about public speaking. Meredith Grundy is a charismatic and passionate public speaking and presentation skills coach. And she helps her clients become more confident and credible. But she comes by it honestly. She's a performer, improviser, and she's the owner of Grundy Coaching LLC, where she's helped hundreds of individuals and teams achieve career growth by helping them find creative solutions for effective communication. Meredith, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here and talk to you about this subject that I'm very passionate about.
You are, and you are a performer. You have a one-person show that you've done. You want to give a shout out to that, to yourself?
I will. Actually, I am patting myself on the back right now as we speak, because that was not an easy thing to do. But I set out to write a one-person show. It was inspired by the passing of my father, who died in 2011. He was a Vietnam vet and a Marine. And I did that show. I created that show. It was 1 hour, and I closed it this last week here in New York City.
Now, was it in person, or did you record it, or?
It was in person. I did it, the live performances. I had a total of, I believe I did 12 performances.
Wow.
And I did record it. So I hired a videographer who did a 3-camera shoot, and you learn something even about public speaking, even though this was a one-woman show.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily me standing up on a stage or here on a Zoom call doing a virtual presentation or something. You always learn something that you can apply to all those other different places in your speaking life.
Yeah. No, I think we all are guilty of looking at what other people are doing and saying, oh, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I would imagine there's just a million moving parts to, trying to think it all through, and where the story's going, but you're kind of holding back, putting little bread crumbs or, that's not easy. None of that's easy.
No, it's not. I think and I find this a lot with my clients too. I feel, even for myself, there were parts of the story that just felt incredibly vulnerable to tell. And so I had to really do a lot of soul searching about, okay, where is that resistance to telling this particular part of the story coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel oftentimes what happens, people don't realize they actually haven't done the work yet before they actually choose to tell a particular story. And then that's where the resistance comes from. Maybe it's because they're speaking from an open wound still. Or maybe it's because it's cultural and they don't feel, they're like, I don't even understand why I need to be vulnerable. What do you mean by that? What do you mean I have to talk about my feelings? So it's a whole gamut of things, but.
I think it's probably a mixed bag, because these were your feelings. This was your father, obviously somebody you love deeply, hopefully love deeply.
Yes.
And so from that standpoint, I'm not saying there wasn't acting involved, but it's not like, I don't want to offend you, Angelina Jolie. I don't know if that's offensive, but if, just an actress picking up this script and going with it, right?
Yeah, it's a different type of performance. It was performative. I was I was I was more storytelling than I was
Right.
acting, if you will. There were some performative elements to the performance itself. For example, where I might take on the role of another character throughout the performance or the
Okay.
essence of a different character. But you're right. Actors, they have script. What makes them wonderful actors, though, is that they bring their authentic selves to the role. They can see themselves through the character, and they're honestly responding if they're in a scene with another actor.
Right.
You've got your method actors like your Leonardo DiCaprio's who will be the part
Right.
until it's done shooting. So there's a different ways to enter into that for so many different people.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. I don't know. It's just, again, we think that what other people do is easy, and I could see just losing it. Someone asked me a question on a podcast the other day, and what was I talking about? I forget what it was, but I just felt myself almost losing it, like just getting very emotional, and it wasn't anything family or anything like that, but just, hey, what drives you? What gives you the greatest satisfaction? It was just something just welled up in me, and I held it together, but it wasn't anything about like talking about my parents, but I would imagine you probably had moments like that.
I did a couple of times. I did. It's interesting because every night's different.
Yeah.
Every night's different. There were a couple times where I could feel the emotions swelling, right? And it's a fine line. It's like, it's not about not showing it. Go ahead and show it. It's just about, I feel like in those circumstances, in this more public space, it's about how do you show that vulnerability, but also you're kind of delicately managing it at the same time, because you're performing, right? You can't just sit there and let it all the waterworks flow.
No, I get it. Well, you have to hold it together, right? You've got to move on to the next scene.
You do. You got to hold on. Yeah, you got to move it through. So,
you know what? And it's interesting because, I asked this question, figuring, okay, this is going to take us off track, but in a way it really doesn't, because we're all performing, right? And we're all, people are definitely afraid of public speaking, in the sense of standing before the school and campaigning for president of student council or whatever, or just standing in a group and having a one-on-one conversation. I don't want to say it's a facade, but we're putting on a persona of some sort of confidence that may or may not be there. And it's one of the things I talked to my wife about, because, what'd you do today? Well, I gave 3 presentations. I'm exhausted. Really? That's it? He's like, oh my God, that just chews up so much energy. You have no idea.
Oh, the amount of energy it takes it's exhausting. And it's because you're in the spotlight.
Yeah.
You're holding the space. And so when you're being called to hold that much space, it doesn't matter how big the group is. Sometimes I have found, even if it's a small group, it's just the same amount of energy that I'm expelling as it is if it's a larger group. In fact, I get more energy if it's a huge group.
Right.
So I find it fascinating. You mentioned it coming across or looking easy to some people. I feel like a lot of that has to do with practice. And I feel that that's where what I've noticed in clients is where people don't make enough time for. They don't make enough time and space for the practice piece of it. And so when they feel not as confident as they would like to feel, or that fear or that fight or flight response is coming up, it's because they probably haven't practiced enough. They haven't practiced in front of an audience, or if it's even a networking event, they haven't put themselves into those I always call them comfortably uncomfortable situations enough to where they start to get the feel of it, right? On a more cellular level. People give up too fast.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking of myself and my own practice, because now I remember back when I was in high school, and again, I was not afraid of any of this stuff. But I did practice. I remember sitting out in the car in freezing Houghton, Michigan, going through my speech, with little note cards. But anymore, if I practice, I practice all the time because I think about it. Yeah. I think about okay, how these things are going to flow and how I'm going to deliver, and jokes or whatever. And I don't have anything written down, but it plays like little tracks in my head, but I don't know. How would you advocate people practicing?
Well, I would first get really clear about your structure and what you want to talk about, what your message is, right? Your story,
Sure.
how that ties into your overall end in mind or objective. And then once you have that framework down, then you start to practice it. You start telling that story over and over and over again. Then you talk about whatever your, let's just say 3 key takeaways are. And then you rehearse. And the one thing that I can't stress enough is that you're doing this all out loud. You're not just sitting at your desk and looking at a piece of paper and trying to memorize from rote. You're actually walking and talking, or sitting and talking. And it's about the repetition. And then asking yourself, if I was an audience member, how would I want to be perceived? What would I want from this presentation? What kind of an experience? Because I think we overlook the fact that it is a tad performative. It is an experience. We do want to inspire. We do want to educate. So if those things are all true, and your objective is, I need these people to trust me, and I need them to feel educated or inspired, and there's that call to action at the end, well, they've got to trust you. But if you're not spending enough time and energy on the content, that's going to be really difficult to build their trust. And when we're not well practiced, we do ourselves a disservice, because then we can't find the fun in it, or the flexibility in it. We can't be conversational with our audience because we're so worried whether or not we're going to miss a part, or if we got the story right, or if maybe the slides don't come up and that throws us off. So then we can't be adaptable in the moment because we're not clear enough about what our script and our message is. Lots of things can happen. So that's why practice, I feel, is key to the success of a great presentation, and or even just on these one-on-one moments. It's like, you got to throw yourself into the fire, and you got to do it again and again and again, and be consistent if you want to get good at it.
No, I totally agree. I tell people, practicing small talk, just strike up a conversation with your server or the person checking you out at the store. I know it drives my kids crazy that I do those things, but I like doing them. Makes me feel good. I'm sure it makes other people feel good to be recognized.
Oh, it totally does. Because you put it on them, because it is all about them, really. Ultimately, it's about your audience and how you're going to serve them. And I mean, how delightful if someone at the grocery store, you park up a conversation. Oh, you care about me.
Yeah.
I'm not just an object. I'm a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you affirmed that.
I do. I totally affirm. I affirm that. And if you need me to talk to your children, I will.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I catch them doing it too. So they like to ridicule me. But then they do the same thing. What do you find harder in coaching people, with longer talks or shorter talks?
Oh,
I have my opinion, but
it varies. It really varies, because it depends on how much work my clients do on their own.
Yeah.
I have clients who in the past have wanted to do like the 45-minute keynote, right? Average length keynote. But I will tell you, the biggest resistance to most people is really telling their story.
What do you mean by telling their story?
So when I say tell a story, most people will tell kind of the nuts and bolts of the story. They'll tell the framework of the story. They'll say, they'll give us the general idea of the story most of the time. And then when you start to invite people to say, okay, but how did you feel? How did that make you feel? Or what was the feeling? What are the details? Like, take me on a journey. Just don't tell me like the general story. Take me on a journey with that story. It's very difficult for people to do.
Okay.
And I understand why. I don't feel, especially those of us who've come up through corporate America, we're not really guided to tell stories. We're guided more to like, here's the presentation, just get to the nuts and bolts and tell us what we need to know. And what's unfortunately, what happens is we don't remember then that content because it's not connected to anything emotional.
Gotcha. That makes
So,
sense. Yeah.
And I think that's the most difficult piece. That's where I see the most resistance. And so until clients can get over that hurdle, most of them do great, whether it's short or long.
Right. For me, I prefer longer.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Toastmasters for a number of years, and those are 6-minute programs. And I mean, it's a great Toastmasters, great, right? It's if you're out there, hire Meredith. But if
hire
that's not,
first.
hire her first. But if it's not in the budget, I mean, Toastmasters is a great place to kind of, well, it's a good place to network, but it's a good place to kind of get started. And, but I didn't like the 6-minute talks because it was, the analogy I always used, it was like the difference between running a 1-mile race or a 100-yard dash. 100-yard dash, you cannot make a single mistake. It's just, everything's got to be just got to be tied together. Whereas when you're running the mile, you could fall when the gun goes off and you could make it up. And so with longer talks, I feel like I can kind of get into the groove. Okay, who's here, who's resonating, who's looking at me, who's playing with their phone, right? Those are the kinds of things that I try to look for. And where can I draw energy from somebody? The person's always shaking their head or whatever it is. And in a shorter talk, you just don't have the time to do that.
You're so right. You're so right. I have more fun doing longer talks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you tell your clients with respect to emotion and trying to, I mean, you talk about telling stories, but there's a lot to stories, well, you just talked about your one-person show, and I'm sure it wasn't all sad. There was happy, you took people through the range of emotions. I would imagine. I haven't seen it yet, waiting for it to come out on film. But that's my guess.
Yes. Well, I think like any great present, you need to, it's like a composition, right? You want to bring people through a journey. You want to, like I said, an experience. And so, oh my goodness, if you can find humor, wonderful. If you can get people to like think a little bit deeper about something, wonderful. So I feel like it's really pulling them through. And I have clients who have very serious subjects. Right. One of my clients is an active shooter trainer. So he helps prevent active shooting from happening.
Active shooting defense.
Defense. Thank you.
Yes.
And that's a very heavy, serious topic.
Yeah.
But he has found ways, analogies, metaphors, if you will, to lighten it up a little bit. And so I think that's important sometimes with these really heavy topics to be able to find the lightness so that you can have the conversation with your audience. So it just isn't we're not all holding tight. We're not all holding our breath. We're not all super serious about things all the time, because listening shifts when we can exhale a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's studied this. But bringing people through the range of emotions, when you have that little shift and there's that little humor, that's totally, when you have a comedian, you're expecting it, right? Yeah. But when you have somebody where it's a serious topic and they're able to say, well, it's kind of like that scene in The Wizard of Oz, where they pull back the curtain on the wizard, and it's just a little man,
Right.
Most people have seen The Wizard of Oz, and so they can kind of use that metaphor. Exactly. And it just draws them in. Interesting. Now you have somebody who does defensive active shooting work. What are other types of clients that you might work with?
So I'm working predominantly, I work with a lot of small business owners, consultants who know that they, in order to grow their business, need to start using their voices more, whether that be getting on camera more. I have an extensive on camera background, so I'm really good at helping people navigate that space, whether that means one-on-ones, whether that be virtually or at networking events. I know we spoke about this before, we hopped on this podcast together, but the public speaking is all of those things. It's not just hopping up on a stage. Yes, part of it is those keynotes, but people who really understand that if they're going to elevate their personal brand, if they're going to grow their business, that they're going to have to be out there speaking. If they're in a leadership role within their organization, they need to be speaking more. So those are predominantly the people that come to me. Most of them are small business owners. I will occasionally get somebody who has taken on a position. One woman I'm working with right now is an interim chair for a university here in New York City. So she knows she has to be stepping into that more of that leadership role. I've had people within tech contact me because they're rolling out new products left and right, and they want to also grow within their organization. They know they need to be better at speaking. So those are predominantly the people that I've been working with. And I love it because it's a diverse group of folks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are they mainly introverts, extroverts, omniverts? Maybe you don't know. I guess I get, this is very prejudicial, but I sense the extrovert like, oh, I don't need her. I'm just going to go. I don't care. Right.
Oh yeah. And you know what? Okay. So sometimes I'll get the extrovert that comes to me. And here's what's interesting. There are people who think they're really good public speakers because they've gotten away with what they've been doing for years.
Right. Probably me.
I don't know.
Okay.
But in reality, they could use some work getting their message out. They could use some clarity. They could use some redirection on their imagery, for example. So if people are doing, we always hear death by PowerPoint, but genuinely, a lot of presentation slides, I notice people become dependent on them. So they become then a crutch and they're not actually really enhancing their message.
Right.
And so I've worked with a lot of doctors. Like I have a company I actually work with out of Denver, Colorado called Hillside Communications, and they work a lot with pharma. So they contract me. And I just noticed that they're just kind of on, it's like a replay almost. So my job is to go in and say, all right, come with open mind, beginner's mind. I always encourage beginner's mind, because there's always something that we can learn. And I'm sharing that with your listeners who might be the extroverts that think they're amazing right now, which I'm sure they are amazing. There are probably components that are amazing, but there's always things that we can adjust and get better at.
Well, what I noticed with, and I don't know if you get into these sorts of things. Well, I'll share a quick story with you. I went to a program and there was a woman presenting and she was very professional and she was a good speaker. I mean, her delivery, everything was good. She had 30 minutes and she had 10 points. And there was a comment card, hey, listen, evaluate me, blah, blah, blah. So you know what? I got a comment card. I'm going to evaluate her. Right. Yeah. And I just told her less is more. I think you would have been much more powerful because in 10 points in 30 minutes, you're not really able to give stories. You're not able to, to go in deep. It was just boom, number 2, number 3, so on and so forth. And I just told her, hey, less is more. Oh my God. She was so pissed. She still hates me, I'm sure. Yeah. She's she knows somebody that I know. And that person came to me and just said, oh my gosh, you just, I don't know what, the comment card. Oh, you're wonderful. That was wonderful.
Right. I mean, wait, if you're going to put a comment card out there, then I always tell people be very specific about what kind of feedback you want.
Yeah.
So, right?
I thought she was a great, and she emailed me and she was, she was not happy. I could tell. I just said, listen, I think you're a great speaker. I think you would have done better trying to cover less material.
I'm wondering if, I'm always curious about people who get really reactionary in that way, because when they do, I feel like there's a truth, right?
Yeah.
There's a truth to it. So I would be curious if this person has actually adjusted and adapted that since then.
I would hope. I mean, because she truly was a very professional person, had, an executive presence to her. I just felt like she was it was not, it wasn't, hey, wash your hands, put the dishes away type. They were technical type HR type stuff. And I just, you didn't need to go through, like she's giving this speech to a chamber, hoping that somebody's going to pick her up and hire her. And she's feeling like she needs to cover everything to show her her total range. And it's like, so
I
don't know.
really appreciate that you brought that up, because I think that's what happens is we feel like we've got to give them everything in the kitchen sink, and you
Yeah.
don't. I feel most people can't retain that much information. I think it's in the upward, like maybe 7 points.
Yeah.
I always say 3 to 5 personally.
Yeah.
And then how do you wrap in that great story so that people remember what your key takeaways are? And I also, a lot of, especially in tech and in medical, there's a lot of data. And often they feel that we need to get all the data in order to understand what the end in mind is. But really, it's about how can I clearly state what the need to know is? What is just the one need to know from this data slide?
Right.
And then also asking the question, do I need all of this at all?
Right.
And then create your presentation from that. Because it just to simplify, I always say leave them wanting more.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
You don't have to give it all away. Chances are they're not remembering anyways.
No.
Especially
especially if you're at those luncheons, right? Where everyone's
Yeah.
looking at their phone and they're eating steak and
Yeah. I mean, it's just,
it's too much.
I can't even remember who she was. And that's sad because there's somebody out there probably hating on me, building little voodoo dolls.
Probably. And she'll probably listen to this episode and be like,
Yeah.
oh my God, not again.
Yeah. Oh my God. I know we've kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about your business a little bit and,
Mm-hmm.
Types of people you work with, how you worked, groups, individual, both. Is it shout out to our friend Sajad. Is it structured like he's got a 6-week program? Boom, boom. Is yours more, hey, listen, you need the 12-week package, buddy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you about my programs. I've got 2 programs. One's
Okay.
Own Your Voice. That's 8 weeks. And those are for people who I do give them a shorter story structure, like a 10-minute one that they can use for practice. And also they can use in their business if need be. And that helps them develop their vocal and physical confidence.
Right.
And get clarity on their storytelling skills. Also, I have a Tell Your Story program, which is 12 weeks. Those are for the folks that are like, I do want to do a keynote. I want to start doing TED Talks. I want to really develop this because I know that it's going to be useful for me as a public speaker. So I have that program. Both those programs also roll into my Confidently Speaking program. So you talk about Toastmasters, what my version of that is.
Right.
It's called Confidently Speaking, and that meets once a week from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And because of my performance background and because I am a big fan of stepping in and getting into these places of being comfortably uncomfortable, the first 30 minutes of each session is spent doing an improv exercise. And we talk about what you learned, what happened, so what's going on with your breath in these exercises, what was going on with your nervous system, what did you notice about your voice, how did you take risk, were you adaptable, all those things, and then how are we going to apply that to those real world situations that arise when we're on stage. For example, last week I had 2 interpreters in the front row and I was not told, and it was starting to throw me off. And because they're whispering and looking on a cell phone during the whole performance, my improv background, I can confidently say, helped me adapt to that situation, use my breath and keep moving forward rather than letting it freeze me, which is what could potentially happen, right?
Yeah.
Especially this was in more intimate space. So we just never know what's going to happen. So that's the Confidently Speaking program. It's a terrific group of people. Also a wonderful opportunity to meet other business folks who are also in that program and network.
Okay. Best way to get a hold of you, grundycoaching.com can they book through there?
Yeah.
Watch your TikTok videos.
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok at Grundy Coaching. You can find me on LinkedIn, Meredith Grundy. And then Grundy Coaching, it's spelled GRUN as in Nancy, D as in dog, EI, coaching.com. And Confidently Speaking is on there, and it's hosted on Mighty Networks. And that is, I believe that's members.confidentlyspeaking.fun.
Okay.
Because we have to have fun learning. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I did bad in chemistry. It wasn't fun.
Right, there you go. So come have fun and laugh and learn some applicable skills that will help you with your public speaking and build that confidence.
I really appreciate your time here today. This has been fun. See,
Yeah.
there we go. Fun. There's the
Look
word.
at fun. Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.